The purpose of this conference today is to deliver two documents that have recently been published that cast serious doubts on the safety of the radiation from smart meters. I have copies of my statement as well as copies of those documents that are available if you want one, hard copies. Once we've done my statement, there'll be two other statements read out by colleagues of mine within the Coalition for Stop Smart Meters. And again, they have copies of those as well. Once we've done those, there will be an opportunity to ask questions, and following the questions, we will be delivering the two documents to the Ministry of Health for Dr. Kendall for his reference. I would point out that Dr. Kendall and a representative from BC Hydro were invited to be here today, but have declined. So anyway, my statement. Two new documents recently published cast serious doubts on the oft-repeated assertions of our provincial health officer and BC Hydro that there are no health risks associated with the electromagnetic radiation emitted by smart meters. The first of these documents is a letter drafted by the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, an international organization based in Wichita, Kansas. In their letter addressed to the California Public Utilities Commission, dated January the 19th of this year, the board of the Academy called for, and I quote, an immediate moratorium on smart meter installation until these serious public health issues are resolved. Continuing with their installation would be extremely irresponsible, end quote. They also urged the commissioners of the California Public Utilities Commission to provide immediate relief for those requesting it and the restoration of the old analog meters. These are strong words from a group of medical professionals who are dedicated to the research and treatment of environmentally induced illnesses such as electrohypersensitivity. The second document is a report that was submitted to the Board of Supervisors of the County of Santa Cruz in California on January 24th of this year. This document includes a memorandum by the county public health officer entitled Health Risks Associated with Smart Meters. The conclusions of this medical officer's report fly in the face of claims made by Dr. Kendall that there is no evidence to suggest that the radiation from smart meters is harmful. Among a list of damning observations, the report states, and I quote, meeting the current FCC guidelines only assures that one should not have heat damage from smart meter exposure. It says nothing about safety from the risks of many chronic diseases that the public is most concerned about, such as cancer, miscarriage, birth defects, semen quality, autoimmune disease, etc. Therefore, when it comes to non-thermal effects of radiofrequency radiation, FCC guidelines are irrelevant and cannot be used for any claim of smart meter safety unless heat damage is involved. End quote. The FCC guidelines referred to in that report, for all intents and purposes, are identical to Health Canada's Safety Code 6, and it behooves me to point out that our provincial health officer and BC Hydro are basing their entire defense of smart meter safety on the guidelines set out in Safety Code 6. So, if anyone claims that there are no scientific studies showing harm, they are either lying or, at best, deliberately ignoring the evidence. Consequently, I would like to pose some questions to Dr. Kendall. Firstly, how long are you going to continue sticking your head in the sand in an attempt to ignore the growing, serious, and highly credible body of evidence that clearly indicates that the radiation from smart meters is potentially harmful? Secondly, when are you going to live up to your sworn responsibility as a doctor to act in the best interest of the public that you are supposed to be protecting from harm? And lastly, you finally acknowledge that you, the official guardian of public safety in the province, need to apply the precautionary principle rather than dance to the tune of your ministerial masters. By the way, as I mentioned earlier, both Dr. Perry Kendall and BC Hydro's Vancouver Island spokesperson, Ted Olnick, were invited to attend this conference but have failed to show up. So, contrary to what BC Hydro would have us believe, every opinion poll that I have seen shows that the public are, on average, 80% against this program. But once again, hard on the heels of the ill-conceived and much-hated HST fiasco, we, the people of British Columbia, are being treated with complete disdain by our government and by the government agencies that are supposed to serve and protect us. So, in closing, I want to call on everyone in the province to take action. Protect your old analog meter and write to or call BC Hydro telling them that you do not give them consent to install these dangerous and illegitimate devices on your homes and businesses. BC Hydro has clearly stated publicly that there will be no retribution against people who refuse consent. So you do not need to fear being arbitrarily cut off or pressurized into accepting smart meters. And finally, add your name to the growing list of people on the website at stopsmartmeters.ca in order to send a clear message that you are willing to protect your health, your safety, and the democracy of our province. Thank you.
Citizens for Safe Technology Society has launched a human rights action against BC Hydro. This human rights action requests the accommodation of individuals refusing a wireless smart meter for health reasons. The complainants are persons with a variety of health concerns, ranging from cancer to heart problems, from seizures to electrosensitivity. These BC citizens have medical letters from their doctors requesting BC Hydro accommodate their health conditions by allowing an analog meter to remain on their homes. As has already been outlined here by Steve Satow of StopSmartMeters.ca, the American Academy of Environmental Medicine officially requested an immediate moratorium on the installation of wireless smart meters based on a scientific assessment of the current medical literature. Their letter states, chronic exposure to wireless radiofrequency radiation is a preventable environmental hazard that is sufficiently well documented to warrant immediate preventative public health action. The AAEM confirms that public health standards are inadequate and obsolete and cannot be used to protect the public from chronic, low-intensity microwave radiation exposures. These exposures raise credible questions about genetic and cellular effects, male fertility, blood-brain barrier damage, and increase in certain types of cancers. The emissions given off by wireless smart meters have been classified by the World Health Organization International Research on Cancer as a possible human carcinogen. Every person in BC has the right to refuse a wireless smart meter being forced upon them without their consent, as guaranteed by our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Cindy Vashore of BC Hydro was recently quoted as saying that quality of life depends on electricity. We would argue that quality of life depends, first and foremost, on a free society that respects the democratic rights of each citizen. Every person in BC, we wish to bring special attention to the concerns many parents have for their children regarding this involuntary wireless exposure. The AAEM warned that children are at heightened risk for altered brain development and impaired learning and behavior from microwave radio frequency. Citizens for Safe Technology agrees with the AAEM that physicians and medical experts have an obligation to urge precaution when sufficient scientific and medical evidence suggests risks to health. These risks may negatively impact the health of vulnerable individuals and groups and can potentially affect large populations, as is the case with BC Hydro's wireless smart meter program. We request that these practitioners uphold the professional ethical standards that they agreed to when taking the Hippocratic Oath. CST calls upon physicians and medical experts in BC to support public health and the human rights action by recommending an immediate moratorium on wireless smart meter installation until these serious public health issues are resolved. We ask that they support patients seeking relief from involuntary and forced exposure to wireless smart meter emissions within their homes by requesting that BC Hydro accommodate them with an analog meter without additional cost or penalty. Concerned British Columbians should visit our website, citizensforsafetechnology.org, where they will find the doctor's information package. Thank you.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I'll begin. For more than a year, citizens from across British Columbia, as well as our grassroots organization, the Coalition to Stop Smart Meters, have been sending letters and petitions to Premier Christy Clark and Energy Minister Rich Coleman requesting a halt to the mandated wireless smart meter program. Many have asked for accommodation for health reasons to be allowed to keep their current analog meters as the only safe and secure option. All requests have been ignored. Now, 31 municipal governments and the Union of BC Municipalities have asked for a moratorium or an opt-out choice due to the strong opposition to smart meters by residents in their communities. These councils have also been ignored. You may ask why Premier Christy Clark and Rich Coleman are not concerned about health reports of potential health impacts. The answer? Because the one person in the province who has the responsibility for overseeing the public's health appears to be ignoring scientific evidence of harm from microwave radio frequency radiation, assuring BC residents that microwave radiation from smart meters is safe no matter what your age, no matter what your size, or how many meters you are exposed to at once, no matter if you depend on sensitive medical equipment, and no matter what your health status. His decision to move ahead without question will affect all British Columbians, many of them children. Dr. Kendall, our provincial health officer, has received major studies and reports from credible sources about the dangers of microwave radiation. However, instead of warning the public about wireless smart meters, he continues to declare all is safe. While many independent scientists and other public health officials are calling for a reduction in radio frequency radiation exposures to protect public health. These independent experts hold the same position as the American Academy of Environmental Medicine and the public health officer from Santa Cruz, California, calling for a collective moratorium on the installation of wireless smart meters until further investigation, calling it an issue of highest importance. We believe that the recent World Health Organization reclassification of radio frequency radiation by 31 international cancer experts is important, and that all citizens of British Columbia must be given the right to refuse exposure to microwave radiation in their own homes and neighborhoods. These wireless emissions from smart meters are a possible human cancer risk, and the recommendation to the public from the World Health Organization is to take pragmatic measures to reduce exposure, not increase it substantially. DDT, lead, and chloroform are all to be carcinogens. Would we allow the government and BC Hydro to expose our families to these dangerous agents against our consent? Of course not, and this should be seen no differently. If the provincial medical officer, Dr. Perry Kendall, is not willing to act on our behalf, even after taking the Hippocratic oath to do no harm, then it is up to us to take matters into our own hands and demand protection for our families. On December 22nd, a legal complaint was filed against BC Hydro with the BC Utilities Commission, charging that they have exceeded the scope of the Clean Energy Act when they decided to install wireless smart meters across BC without any independent oversight or without any public input. This is simply not acceptable to most British Columbians. Consent to this constant radiation exposure permeating through our homes has never been granted. It is a potentially deadly and completely unnecessary pollution. If any Crown project is worthy of implementation, then allow due process to take place and respect our legal right to make decisions related to health, privacy, and security in our own homes. What we ask is reasonable and lawful. What we describe is democracy, nothing more and nothing less. We all have a vested interest in BC Hydro as a Crown corporation. And that is why we are here now urging all British Columbians to get involved. This is an essential service we all must use and depend upon. We know from past experience, action is taken by government only when enough voters collectively speak out. That time is now. Demand a stop to this wasteful spending of $1 billion or more of our hard-earned dollars, the erosion to our civil liberties, and the very real health threat to our families. Write to your MLA, your local government, to the BC Utilities Commission, and the media, expressing your concern with the smart meter program. Demand that you retain the right to keep our homes safe, private, and secure as we choose. Please go to stopsmartmetersbc.ca, also stopsmartmeters.ca, and citizensforsafetechnology.org for more information and to donate funds in support of our legal action. There is no time to wait. The time is now. Thank you.
Hello and thanks for watching Face to Face. Our guest today is Walter McGuinness. Walt is with StopSmartMeters.ca. I think that's correct?
Correct, yeah. And
basically what we're going to be talking about is the press conference that you just saw preceding this. So Walt, to me, the most important issue is health. And BC Hydro keeps saying that having a smart meter in your house is about the same as being on a cell phone for 30 seconds a day. So when they say that, people are going to think, well, I'm on a cell phone for 30 seconds a day and I'm not dead yet, so why should I worry about smart meters?
It's a good question, Jack. I mean, there's a lot of things to consider, and a glib small, short answer that you see in the media all the time in these glib sort of statements that Hydro makes, masks the reality of how these things really work. Number one is I have tested this type of equipment, and it does operate all day, every day. And I've tested smart meters, and they do beam out energy all the time. Now, what Hydro's talking about is the message, the information that's sent back from the meter to the command control at BC Hydro. That only has to happen a few seconds a day. That's true, but those packets of information are also sent out in millisecond packages. So you could have a meter that could pulse maybe 100 times, and that might just take up a second or two.
So the problem is that whenever they pulse 100 times a day, perhaps, an energy beam, a high pulse energy beam is going through your body.
That's correct. So firstly, you have these energy packets that are being pulsed back to BC Hydro. You can add them all up, and they might add up to a few seconds or a few minutes a day. Now, the thing to remember is this, is that this is what they claim their equipment is doing. What we should be more concerned about is the capabilities of the technology. How often can they transmit, and in other jurisdictions, how do they actually work? And if you ask those questions, you find out they can transmit almost continuously, and meters have been measured all around the world transmitting almost continuously.
So when BC Hydro says it's only 30 seconds a day, they're not talking about what actually happens, they're talking about what?
Well, it's like a strobe light, Jack. I mean, if you take a strobe light, it only comes on for very short periods of time, but you get the effect. You see the light flashing. So, if you say BC Hydro decides every 15 minutes they want to get some information from that meter, and the meter pulses for maybe 2 or 3 hundredths of a second, well, you can imagine if that in an hour we're still only in a fraction of a second, and in a day it's still maybe a fraction of a minute. So the thing to remember is that these things can pulse that with that amount of a frequency, or much, much more than what the Hydro is claiming. There's nothing to restrict BC Hydro from transmitting more often. There's no regulations. They can do whatever they want. These meters can transmit continuously if they chose to have them work that way. In other jurisdictions, that is how they're working. So that's why I'm always insisting that we should be looking at the capabilities of the technology and not the vague assurances of public relations departments in BC Hydro.
Well, thanks for that, Walter, because really that's about, we keep hearing from BC Hydro 30 seconds a day, 1 minute a day, But when you explain it like that, it kind of takes on another...
Well, what I think, Jack, we also have to get a big picture is that the meter is transmitting information back to BC Hydro, but also the meter is talking to all the other meters in the vicinity, which could be a couple of thousand meters at any time, and they do what's known as chatter. They just chatter to each other all the time. They're throwing radiation around in the environment. Also, the meters are communicating back to all the appliances in the house, and what all the major appliances in our homes eventually will have a Zigbee chip, which is basically a small transmitter receiver, which will transmit information to the hydrometer. So there's radiation within the home that's now mandated to occur. Now, Hydro claims that they will not activate that Zigbee chip, which they remotely, unless the homeowner has consented.
Now, I'm just going to stop you right there. So I heard somebody from Ontario speaking on the radio a short time ago, and they said almost the same thing, that there are now chips in the major appliances in Ontario that can transmit back and forth with the new smart meter. So is that already happening in BC as well?
Well, that's one of the major purposes of the whole system, is to be able to turn appliances on and off remotely. Now, the thing is again, I'd stress that what Hydro claims and what their public relations departments are telling us are one thing, but what is the capabilities of the technology? Hydro can turn on and off those appliances remotely without your consent. There's no law that tells them that they can't do it. They claim that they're going to ask the homeowner to do it, but there's nothing to restrict them from doing it.
Now, this is what the fellow from Ontario said. In fact, he was the former Minister of Environment. And I think what he was saying was that, for example, you've got your dryer going, your clothes dryer going during at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they want that energy to sell somewhere else. So basically, he said, with your consent, up until now in Ontario, they will turn off your dryer and ship that energy somewhere else. So that's the kind of thing. So the chips are coming or are already in our appliances. They're going to be talking back and forth with the smart meter. And again, this is a sea of wireless radiation that they, and this is, BC Hydro is a Crown Corporation. They're supposed to be working for us. They're misinforming us. They're misleading us. They're giving us very strange information. They're spending $1 billion to put these things in of our money. We don't want them, but we can't stop them. What's going on here?
Well, you know, to be fair, they haven't activated the chips in the appliances yet, but that can happen in the future. What you have to look at, I mean, you have to look at BC Hydro's track record, in this case, Accenture's track record. And you know, Accenture formerly was the part of the Arthur Andersen and Associates group, who were associated with the Enron collapse and all that. So, but Accenture is a huge public relations firm, and they and Arthur Andersen were handling some of the major corporate accounts globally. So they run into to manage BC Hydro, and a good portion of their management strategy is putting out a message to the public that best suits the corporation. And what they seem to forget is that there's something, you know, some of their statements have to represent reality and truth. And some of the things that they've said really do stretch reality and the truth. And I think the public mistrusts them. Now, if they're saying, for instance, oh, we're going to consult with you about how we're going to operate this system, one could only ask, well, is that the same way you consulted with us up to this point when you decided to bring this program in? The public was not consulted about the smart meter program. There wasn't one word of debate in the legislature before the act was passed, not one word. There was no opposition. The Clean Energy Act just breezed through like business as usual. They took the BC Utilities Commission out of the picture, which would normally allow us to have some access where the public could have, meetings and such with the Utilities Commission. They could have a commission on it. Nothing like that could happen. And now it becomes very obvious, to me anyway, that the reason why they had to do that is because they knew the program would never stand the scrutiny from the public or from experts, energy experts, or from people who are economic experts. This program is a disaster in every front. So in my view, the government decided we can't take that scrutiny, so we have to remove the BC Utilities Commission from this process. And while we're at it, let's take them the way their oversight over all the run-of-the-river projects, which are part and parcel of this whole scenario, and let's not let them look at the Site C dam that we want to build either. None of those programs can even come anywhere near meeting the minimum requirements for the general public that say, okay, we should go ahead because there are trade-offs perhaps, but there's more pluses and minuses. There's just all minuses on this, and hydro, and the government has decided to go ahead anyway. So the BC Hydro has no credibility here. And also, when they get into quoting our Chief Medical Health Officer and looking at health issues, which we'll talk about, again, upon any amount of scrutiny, you realize there's no credibility in those claims either.
When you say our Chief Public Health Officer, you're talking about Dr. Perry Kendall, who has consistently come out and said that essentially there is no harmful effect from this kind of microwave radiation coming from cell phones, or, as we're talking about now, smart meters, or the Wi-Fi systems that are being set up in all of our communities, in schools, in restaurants, everywhere. So you're suggesting that there is a health impact from all of that.
Well, what I did is I just followed up on that, and I contacted Dr. Kendall by email and asked him for his sources, basically, to just review where he's getting his evidence. And he gave me some of his sources, which I checked up on. Now, the problem with his sources was each and every one of them were embroiled in huge controversies. It was either conflict of interest controversies, payout controversies about conflict of interest by influencing agencies with direct money from the industry. There was one agency that was just happened last year that embroiled in an academic fraud case where somebody was claiming to have credentials that they didn't have. And then we have an agency like the Center for Disease Control, which was using a committee that was stacked with the military and industry people. So when I checked Dr. Kendall's sources, and we could go over them a little more in detail if you want, he did not have any credible sources. I mean, we're not talking about nitpicking. We're talking about just good, solid sources, good research, hopefully independent. Nothing near that, Jack. His sources were just industry, military sources that either the influence was direct or indirect using financial means. So when I brought that up to him with another email, just said, listen, we get concerns about this. These are well-known cases that have been in the media. That these sources were compromised. I asked him, do you have any other sources you could provide to me? And he didn't. So, I mean, this is very troubling. The public should say, wow, our Chief Medical Health Officer is not providing real credible sources to support his position that this type of radiation is not dangerous. The other thing to note is that whenever, like Steve Satow did in this press conference, bringing two very, very important documents to him, showing that there was credible sources saying that we have concerns. When we have, for instance, a list of medical health officers that have listed their concerns. When we have, for instance, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, that issued the declaration last year that said that electromagnetic radiation such as that emitted from a smart meter or a cell phone is now classified as a type 2B carcinogen. What's troubling is that he has ignored these warnings, and instead, let's say, cherry-picked the groups that he seemed to favor, that say there is no harm, and then of course we find that all these sources are compromised. How else? What else can you say? Well, this picture is not good. We have a situation where we have a very serious public health threat, I believe, and our health authorities are not doing the right thing.
So the health threat that you believe, and I believe also, is the imposition of smart meters into all of our homes and businesses.
Well, you know, Milt Bowling said in an interview recently, and he pointed out very correctly, that this is the first time in the history of Western democracies that a government has mandated that the citizens place a carcinogenic agent in their homes without choice. And this is the case we have. I mean, the comparisons are always made, oh, we have cell phones, we have Wi-Fi, we have all this other radiation in our environment. Well, most of that, by the way, is a voluntary thing. Particularly in your home, you can choose not to have wireless technology. And many, many people have chosen not to have wireless technology.
I'm going to interrupt here because I just had this same conversation with somebody a few days ago who lives in a townhouse, and they said a friend of theirs had come by and just checked their house and said they were actually exposed to 5 or 6 different Wi-Fi systems from neighbors and etc. So even there, it's not voluntary. You can't really escape from it. That's for sure.
Yeah, I should have said for the most part. And it's true that with this technology coming online now, where all this wireless internet and cordless telephones and such are occurring, that yeah, you can have infiltration into your home. But you know, it's still the case that there was some type of a choice. You could decide whether or not to hold a cell phone to your head. You could decide whether or not to put these transmitters in your home, and based upon what you felt was a strong evidence that there's a health issue. But now our medical health officer is okaying our Crown Corporation, BC Hydro, to put a wireless transmitter on every home, but also by allowing these Zigbee chips to be placed in all the appliances, allow all these transmitters to be activated within the home. So we're in a new era now where we have a government that's forcing us to be exposed to this type of radiation. And, you know, this is a known carcinogenic agent. I mean, it's astonishing to think about it, but we are in that situation right now.
And ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt. I mean, I've spoken to scientists myself, and I've seen people on the internet and on television say quite clearly, people who with great expertise in this, that this kind of microwave radiation is dangerous at very, very low levels. Certainly the levels coming from a cell phone, and certainly the levels coming from Wi-Fi or smart meters. It's like smoking cigarettes, I think, and secondhand cigarette smoke, except we are now immersed in this 24/7. Every day of our lives, we're immersed in this growing sea of microwave radiation that is dangerous, but there is so much money to be made by the corporations who run our country and our governments that they're not going to stop unless we can stop them.
Well, the key to this is regulations. And where are the regulations to protect the public health? And there aren't any. Safety Code 6 and these other guidelines that are quoted are not public health regulations.
I'm going to stop you again, because I'm sure nobody knows what Safety Code 6 is, so maybe you can tell us.
Well, Safety Code 6 is a guideline that was created by Industry Canada and accepted by Health Canada as an exposure standard for people who might come in contact with electromagnetic radiation, such as that emitted from wireless devices and
So
such.
that's all of us.
That's all of us. Now, what that guideline was based upon was basically research that was done in the 1950s by the U.S. military when their radar workers were actually getting heated up by the equipment around them. And their bodies were warming up, in some cases harming them and killing them.
So you mean because there was so much, almost like being inside of a microwave oven
That's
and
right.
getting warmed up.
This is microwave radiation, and if it's at a certain signal strength, it will actually make the molecules in your body vibrate and warm, and the friction will actually warm up, just like you warm up a bowl of soup in the microwave. So these are basically standards set to keep people from just being cooked. And these are not health standards. These are
So, and the government of Canada says that as long as you are not being cooked, in quotation marks, there is absolutely no safety concern whatsoever.
That's been their position.
But scientists from around the world are saying that health effects are found at much, much, much lower levels, hundreds of times lower than what Safety Code 6 is.
Well, this is when you get into some astonishing things, and actually thousands of times lower, millions of times lower. You can actually get biological effects, and a lot of them negative. So firstly, we have to start out with, like, and as Steve Satow pointed out so eloquently in his press conference, that this is the whole basis upon the government and BC Hydro is based their safety standards on, is this so-called Safety Code 6. And the Chief Medical Health Officer is completely backing this up. But upon scrutiny, you realize, hang on, this is not a health regulation. This is a tissue warming regulation. And if you look at the research and you say, well, at what exposure level actually causes detrimental health effects, they do occur at thousands and thousands of times below what it takes to heat tissue. So the whole thing falls apart for them right there. They're counting on the public never figuring this out, apparently. This very basic fact that there are no health regulations to protect you. So we're dealing with that one issue ongoing, that the Chief Medical Health Officer really refuses to acknowledge these what are known as non-thermal health effects.
Now, the provincial government has told BC Hydro basically to place these smart meters on everybody's home. The provincial public health officer could raise the alarm and save the day for us. But he's not. He's instead saying that everything is safe. But why is Christy Clark, our premier, I mean, why is she doing this to us? Well, and where is the NDP?
Great questions, Jack. The why of it is always the mystery, isn't it? Why do these politicians make these decisions based upon this criteria which is so faulty?
And it's worth mentioning that this is an ongoing worldwide issue. It's not only happening here in BC, it's happening around the world. So clearly there are very, very powerful forces at play mandating that these things happen because people don't want them anywhere, but it doesn't matter.
You know, I'm going to mention one for instance for you, because I just did a little bit of so-called research on this just recently, and it was around Dr. Kendall quoting the Centers for Disease Control. And so I kind of checked out how they operate, how they look at this information and all that. Well, they have a committee, it's a very long name, but it's the EMF working group, basically, that looks at this evidence when it's brought in, and they assess whether it's a valid research paper and if it has anything in that research that would warrant the medical health officer maybe to change his mind or change his position. So I looked at that EMF working group, looked into who belonged to that group.
And this is the BC Centre.
This BC Centre for Disease Control use a group that's not controlled by them. And there's a lot of jurisdictional issues about how they do operate because there's no ministerial oversight on that committee whatsoever. They're a hand-picked group from across Canada that are self-appointed. And when I first looked into them, the chairman of the group was a major from the U.S. military. From the Canadian military, strike that, Canadian military, which would make you feel a little better perhaps. And one of the members in the committee was an employee of BC Hydro.
Okay, so this is a committee that our provincial public health officer is getting information from regarding safety.
That's right.
And the chair, did you say, when you started to look into this, was a major in the Canadian military?
That's correct.
Now, the military, of course, takes its own point of view on EMF.
Well, they're heavy users of electromagnetic technology with sonar and radar and all that. And also, they use electromagnetic weapons. So, not the sort of folks you'd want to consult with on safety standards, because obviously they have a conflict of interest. Also, with the employee from BC Hydro, there's a long-term, has been sitting on that committee for many, many years, had no particular qualifications for looking at research, but he was sitting on the committee. And as you look through the whole list, you just had industry people, you had some of the people that we've seen before from Health Canada and all that all have long records of supporting corporate interests and ignoring the concerns of the public, in my opinion. So here was a committee that was really stacked. Let's face it. And when you send your research into Dr. Kendall, he sent it to the Centers of Disease Control, who hand it over to these guys. And they are the ones that make the declarations whether this information is valid or not. There's no recourse. The public can't challenge them. There's no oversight. There's no ministerial oversight. They don't have to answer to any governmental agency. They just decide on this stuff, and that's the end of it. So, I mean, this is just one example, Jack. I mean, I might be oversimplifying a little, but because they can always say, oh, no, we do other things. But when you find that in a half hour or 1 hour little bit of Googling and a couple of phone calls, this is not heavy-duty digging. You realize, well, this is very compromised. This one group is very compromised. What would a medical health officer have anything to do with these people? Obviously, he would listen to them and discuss with them about technology and the use of technology because they're heavy users of it, but he wouldn't rely on them to make the decisions on the level of safety. It doesn't make any sense.
Now, you said that Steve Sato, and I guess this happened late in January of this year, provided 2 documents to Dr. Kendall, who once again, Dr. Kendall is the Chief Medical Health Officer of the province of BC, and Dr. Kendall says that there is no impact, really. Electromagnetic radiation is safe, cell phones are safe, smart meters are safe. Now, Steve Sato provided a couple of documents to Dr. Kendall.
That's correct. And I wish I had them with me because I could quote them a little more succinctly. But basically, these are 2 very credible organizations. The American Academy for Environmental Medicine is an organization that have medical doctors and researchers that look at the environmental causes of disease. Isn't that a radical notion? They actually look at what's in the environment and try to figure out whether or not that's causing illnesses. Hardly ever happens, Jack. It's as strange as it, we spend billions of dollars on genetic research every year. But nobody's looking at the environmental causes of disease. Well, they did make a recommendation to I think it's Santa Cruz.
Yes, Santa Cruz.
And basically, the chief medical health officer of that city has decided that was good enough evidence, and she's making a recommendation that they call a moratorium on the smart meter program in that region.
Now, again, so the chief medical health officer of either the city or county of Santa Cruz, California, is calling for a moratorium on the installation of smart meters. Now, it was also mentioned at the press conference that I think 31 BC municipalities, including several here in the CRD, have called for a moratorium on the installation of smart meters, and so has the British Columbia Union of Municipalities, representing all the towns and cities. They voted on this and also asked for a moratorium.
Well, estimates are that these municipalities, if you add up the populations, is like 1.4 million people. So these,
Interestingly, very little coverage was given in our corporate media of this. You'd think it would be on the front page. BC Hydro is sticking smart meters on everybody's homes. There's no doubt that they pose a danger. The municipalities are asking that there be a moratorium put in place. Where is the information in the media? Why is the media not warning the public, who they always pretend to care so much about what is happening? And maybe that's not a question. That's just a statement. And it's up to all of us to be contacting the media, and not only contacting them, but knowing that the media also doesn't work for us, just like BC Hydro isn't working for us, just like we have to wonder who the chief medical health officer of the province, in whose interests is he working. We have to ask who the media is working for, because if we don't start asking these questions, things are only going to keep getting worse.
Well, on that note, I mean, Hydro this last week was trying to hire, I think, 25 more firms for public relations for the work for them, and part of that would be, of course, to work on the smart metering program and to sell it to the public. You have to realize that really we're getting into massive amounts of money spent, millions and millions of dollars are spent by Hydro every year to try to convince us that what they're doing is a good idea.
And the smart meter program itself is costing at least $1 billion to install all of these things.
Oh, yes, and their public relations departments, their budgets are larger than a lot of media outlets. They have writers, they consult constantly with other public relations firms. So it's a juggernaut. And I think really, you know, and you said this many, many times in this show, and it's always been a preoccupation of many of us, is that for a democracy to function properly, you have to have a free flow of information. All views should be examined and discussed, and all views are legitimate. But right now, with this corporatization of the media, and it's almost complete now, the parameters in which issues are discussed are very, very narrowed, to the point where the public really are not getting all the dissenting views, are not getting all the other ideas that would make things work better. So democracy cannot function, I think, under this sort of information system that we have right now.
So your group, StopSmartMeters.ca, is putting together the beginnings of a citizens initiative, exactly like what was done with the entire HST program. And mentioning HST, we should remember that we still have the HST, even though we voted to get rid of it, which is an absolute disgrace and insult to our democracy, but another question. So how is that coming along, the putting together this next citizens initiative?
We're at the very beginning stages, and we've formed a board. We've created a website. We're just now contacting our first volunteers that have signed up on our website. We have around 4,000 signatures on the website right now. The initiative vote, if it's allowed, is still well over 2 years away. So we're just starting to build the infrastructure that we're going to need in order to carry out that mandate. And basically, we want to provide to the citizens of British Columbia the opportunity to have a vote on a major decision in this province. That is our burning desire, and the citizens actually could turn up at the polls and vote in favor of smart meters, and we would say, okay, we've done our job. That the democratic process is the most important issue here, that we have to protect democracy, and we feel the only way to do that is to go through this initiative again.
Okay. Now let's recap the major points here. First point, I think, is that there is a health risk from these smart meters. Yes? No?
Well, absolutely. There's enough evidence there to warrant taking precautionary steps. And one has to realize is that in any potential health threat, there's very rarely any absolute proof that something is going to be harmful. But in this world of science, it's all gauged upon the information and the potential threats. And we are always asking our health authorities and for our governments to set prudent policies to limit exposure, to reduce the chances of harm, and especially until we really know for sure the negative consequences and what they could be.
I think when you say that it's difficult to prove things dangerous, that is still true, I believe, of cigarettes. I think cigarettes have still not proven to be dangerous, but we've taken the steps necessary to at least remove many of ourselves from that danger. Secondly, BC Hydro's comment that a smart meter in your home is the same as having a 30-second-a-day cell phone conversation, you would say that the risk is much, much greater than that.
Well, it's very deceiving how they put that. But in the end, you have to realize that this is radiation that they're placing in the home, that these meters do transmit much more than what Hydro is claiming, and that it's just unfair that we have to accept that they are going to put this in our homes with our consent.
Some jurisdictions have started to I've read that in California now, people can opt out of the smart meter program, get back their old analog, is it called?
That's correct, yeah.
The old electric meter, you can get it back, but you have to pay. You have to pay something. But at least you have the right to get out of it. What do you think about that for here in BC?
Well, it's a start, isn't it? The program has no merits. There's nothing to warrant going ahead with this type of a program. Economically, it's disastrous. Environmentally, it's disastrous. If you look at issues around privacy in our homes, we're basically being monitored by the second. No matter what Hydro says, this information is being gathered. Every time you use anything in your home, that information is gathered. So, I mean, we're losing a lot of ground here on what we thought our society was all about. It has no merits whatsoever. So the program should simply be scrapped. But having said that, for people that are really suffering from detrimental effects, having that meter taken off their homes is very important, and we support that.
Maybe to finish up, your group, StopSmartMeters.ca, people can go to the website, and also you guys are working on a citizens initiative.
That's right. We're always encouraging people to come to our website. We're always putting new videos on the website around the issues, discussing what's happening worldwide also. We're soliciting support. We're asking for donations, of course, and also we're asking for volunteers and people who intend to sign the official petition when it's available to sign up on our site to show support, and we'll be able to contact them and keep them abreast of what the developments are.
StopSmartMeters.ca. Where's the NDP on all of this?
Well, this is a good question, Jack, and I mean it may be a topic for another whole show, but we don't see the NDP stepping up to bat for us right now. We don't see any firm policies. There's no call for a moratorium on the program. We just simply do not see a lot of opposition that's meaningful to help support us, and certainly they're not advocating that they should go to initiative vote.
So contact your media folks if you're interested. Demand some coverage on this issue and some truth, not just coverage, but true coverage. Contact your local MLA, Liberal or NDP, and tell them what you think about the issue. If you support it, that's fine. If you don't, let them know. Walter, any last words? We're almost out of time.
Well, as you said, it's always been, my desire and those around me is to try to strengthen our democracy and try to gain back ground that we've lost, frankly. And the only way we can do that is we have to become more engaged and get outside of our comfort zone, perhaps, and get out and talk about these issues, and as you say, get your MLAs involved and all that. But it's going to take a lot of work on our part. We have to pry ourselves away from the hockey game maybe once in a while or something, but we do have to get engaged, and it won't work unless people demand change. So, you know, there's an opportunity right now. We have a big issue here that's happening right in our province right now. We can change this if we get out there and demand it.
Okay, folks, time to step up. Thank you for watching Face to Face.